ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Playtech TV. My name is Kevin, and today we're going to be doing part 2 of our Beat a Console build. Now if you haven't watched part 1, I suggest you click this motherboard box here, and that will take you back to that video as we went over what parts we're going to be using for the build and why we picked those parts. But today in part 2, with the assistance of Playtech's Greg, we're going to be building the system itself. So let's get into it. So just doing an overview of the motherboard, our rear I/O guard will be covering these guys at the back here. This is our 4-pin CPU power. Up here is for the CPU fan. These are our RAM slots. Obviously here is the socket for the CPU. It's our 24-pin for the motherboard power. Over here is for our front USB 3.0. These are the SATA ports here. The PCIe, this is where our graphics card is going to be going into. Another system fan connector there. And down here is just going to be for all the front panel USB, front panel audio, and all that good stuff. So we have the motherboard out right now, and we're going to be installing the CPU and RAM with it out. You can install it in the case, which is what some people do, or outside of it. We're just doing this purely so we can show you guys how you install everything. So let's install that CPU. Okay, so here we are zoomed in on the CPU socket. So the first thing we're going to do is lift up the retention arm on the right hand side. You don't need to take off that black cover, that will pop off by itself. So lift the arm back, lift the cover up. You see underneath now is the pins themselves. So you can see this big arrow down here at the bottom left corner. We match that up with a corresponding arrow on the CPU, as you can see there. Yep. And then we just simply drop the CPU in. You can just drop it straight in like that. Give it a little bit of a wiggle. See, it's not moving anywhere. We have the arrow there and the arrow there. It'll only go in one way, as of course the writing is how it would normally be as well, corresponding to the motherboard. Then we simply drop down the flap. Make sure it's under the screw. You can take the black plastic off, or it'll pop off by itself, whichever way you want. Then lower the retention arm down. Now you're going to have to use a bit of strength here, a bit of muscle, but it's all fun. And there you go, your CPU is installed. So now we're just going to be installing the stock Intel cooler onto it. We are not going to be running an aftermarket cooler with this build. So you just put it in like that, clip down the outside. It's very easy, very straightforward, and then just take the 4-pin for the CPU fan power and connect it to the 4-pin header at the top of the motherboard. Okay, now we're going to install the RAM. So first we've got to pull the clips back on either side. Sometimes the motherboard will only have them at the top side, but in this case it's both sides. Then we have to align the notch in the RAM on the board to the cutout on the RAM stick itself. And then you simply just press it in, and the clips will clip it in. It's that easy. There you go. So now we're just going to put the I/O shield, which comes with the motherboard, onto the back of the case. So it's very simple. You just push it in from the inside there. It could be a little bit fiddly, but yeah, you just need to push it straight in. And that's where the rear I/O of the motherboard will show through. So before you add your motherboard, install your motherboard into the case, you're going to need to add your motherboard standoffs. In this particular situation, we only needed to add the single one. Now these will come with your case as an accessory, and if you need to know which ones you need to add, just check your case manual. We just need to add the single one down here because these pre-existing ones are already here. Now another good thing to note is that you should be using an anti-static bracelet when working inside the case. This is to stop any static shocks to your fragile components. Okay, now we're just going to slide our hard drive in, our 500 gigabyte Seagate Barracuda. We just need to put 2 screws into the sides to keep it in place. Okay, so now we're going to plug everything in with all these cables. So this is a non-modular power supply, meaning that you're going to get all the cables together. So the first thing we're going to plug in, we've got everything out, is the 24 pin for the motherboard power, that big one you see there. Yep. So just going to plug that one in. Very easy, just on the right hand side of the motherboard. There we go. Next we're going to put in the 4 pin for the CPU power, that one right there. Yep. That goes off to the left hand side of the CPU. Up the top there. It's quite hard to film. There you go. You can see it there. So now we're going to connect up the power for the hard drive, which is that one there. There we go. And then we connect up our SATA connector to the hard drive. This is what's going to be transferring the data. And then to the SATA connection on the motherboard. There we go. So now we're going to do the front I/O. So first we're going to do our USB 3.0 connector. Then like that. Then we'll do our front panel audio, which goes down there. And then next we have all the front power switches and all that. Just check your motherboard manual if you want to know where these guys go, and they'll go down here. And that's all them plugged in. So here we are, just removing the slot at the back so that the graphics card can slide through, and the graphics card's I/O will poke out the back. So on a 2-slot graphics card like this, we'll need to take out 2 of these slots. Now we just have to install the graphics card into the PCI 16X slot. Just slots straight in, you just push it down. Then all you just need to do is add the screws into the slot at the side. And finally we just need to connect the 6-pin power for the graphics card. As you can see, it's a bit of a mess, so we're just going to take 2 seconds to tidy this all up with some cable ties. We booted up the rig and everything was just fine. All the components are fine. Everything's working a-okay, so that's really good to see. Now, as far as operating systems go for the system, we're going to be putting Windows on it only just because of the tests I'm going to be running on it and the benchmarks and all the rest of it. But if you wanted to, you could run Ubuntu on a system like this, or Steam OS if you wanted to also. Now, I suggest you guys subscribe to Playtech TV, because in part 3 we're going to be obviously doing all the overclocking, seeing how high we can overclock that Pentium K and the 260X, and then we're going to be doing the testing to see how much power we got out of this build. I thank you all for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.